So back in the time of ancient Greece, the theory of the universe was geocentric. The Earth was the center of the universe. So there you go. Okay, the Earth was unmoving and everything revolved around the Earth. That was the original belief of how the universe worked. Then we had Christianity come in, and the priests and the religious teachers of the time taught that God placed the Earth at the center of the universe. So for the longest time, that's what we thought. That the Earth was fixed. We thought the stars were fixed. Like it was just like a big curtain with holes in it. And so from about, I don't know, something BC to now, well, now being the 1700s, 1600s, this is what we thought. But then things change. Okay, so here is the geocentric theory in a visual perspective. The Earth in the middle, the moon, Venus, the sun, Mars, and then all the stars. And that is, and this was the accepted view of the universe up until we get to the scientific revolution. Now, that does not mean there weren't people out there going, I don't know, kind of think differently. But remember, the church is a huge influence. So to go against the church could have kept you excommunicated or your family. So you probably didn't fight it a whole lot. So our first person is Aristotle, Greek philosopher. He developed the geocentric model. And it had long-lasting effects. Again, when taking notes, think about what matters. We're talking about the universe. And we're talking about how we're starting to develop actual scientific thought. Aristotle, geocentric model developer. That should be all you need to put. When he lived, that's great. But does it have any bearing on a unit on the scientific revolution or other revolutions? No. Have I ever asked you a question about when someone was born? No. Should you know that he was before Galileo? Yes. But birth dates you can look up. All right. The next person is a guy, don't pronounce the P. It's Ptolemy. Claudius Ptolemy. Notice now we're in AD. So now we are 400 years later. And he lived till 165. So he lived 80 years. That's a pretty good life in first century, second century world. Ptolemy, an astronomer, a mathematician, a geographer. He expanded this theory, Aristotle's geocentric theory. I like the fact these are short little bullet of information. He is responsible for trig and introducing trigonometrical, that's an actual word, or trigonometry methods to trying to figure out distance and space. And it's going to play a role later with navigation. If you don't like geometry, blame the Greeks. Euclid was a Greek. There's a whole school of geometry based on him. Again, before the scientific revolution, because you need a foundation, science was called natural philosophy. Again, it's not science yet. What makes science science? Anybody? What makes it science and not philosophy? It's proven. How do you know if an experiment is good? If the science is good in any research? Anybody know what one thing has to happen?
Someone asked me this the other day, and they told me the answer, and I can't remember.
Yes, excellent, Holden. You have to be able to replicate it. You have to be able, I need to do an experiment, write down the steps, and Bella should be able to follow the steps and get the same result. That's good science. Excellent. Ooh, maybe I can now, once people come back to class, I can have a mad dash can do an impromptu class conversation for breakfast. Mm-hmm. Why? I think it's a lot. It's just what if you like that would have gotten points and put it on the board. Yeah, it's not like you have. It's not like I'm going to ask questions and it's a quiz. It's through participation. All right, and with fewer people in class, I can get a better breakfast. Science mixed with moral philosophy, with theology, with numerology, with alchemy and magic. So science back in the day was everything couldn't be explained. And this is also probably pre-Christianity. Because once Christianity and or Judaism come into play, then the answers to those unsolvable things are, well, God. Ancient Greek sources were highly trusted. Few experiments were performed. So like we just said, not really science. There's a word, there's a prefix proto, which is like before, like a proto language. Anyway, so it's like proto-science. It's not quite science, but they are asking questions. And they are trying to make sense of the world in which they occupy. But it's not replicated. It's not science. All right. Any questions? Remember, don't forget to raise your virtual hands if you have any questions. I like that smell better. I switched it out yesterday. I like that one better. All right. What was the scientific revolution? Why, I'll tell you. Well, first of all, it took place in the 16th century from 1542 to roughly 1700. So during the tail end of the Renaissance, during the High Renaissance, we start, because remember, that's all about questioning. So it makes perfect sense that we start questioning how the world around us works. A new way to study the universe, old authority. Okay. Blind acceptance. In other words, this is the way it's always been, isn't going to fly anymore. That's a big change. And you can think of one group who's not going to be happy about this. And we start applying math to the natural world. Because no matter where you are in the world, numbers are numbers, and math is math. It is the true universal language. If you were to look at data from students who go to public schooling, who come from other countries where English is not their first language, they do better in math if they're than almost any other subject, because numbers are numbers. And we start creating and spreading new ideas and new discoveries. So we're going into the adventures out there, the stage of our world's history. We're all Mr. Fredricksons. And what's the boy's name? In Up? Bummer. I can't remember his name. All right. I know Mr. Fredrickson, but I can't remember the kid. Okay. So what caused it? Exploration causes the scientific revolution. Going in and going to new places and seeing new animals, seeing new plant life, seeing new people that look different, and beginning to ask questions. How did they get there? Why does it work like this? How and why? The two greatest questions ever. Ancient medieval works get translated into Latin and then into vernacular languages, local languages. Remember the printing press, increased literacy. It is now cheaper to buy a book, which means that more people are eventually going to read this book, which means ideas are going to move, they're going to diffuse through Europe. And new inventions and new institutions like schools or universities or ways of thinking promote sharing of knowledge. Again, the salon in the Enlightenment, where people would just come together and talk. So just the way we're operating in the world is changing, and it allows for the sharing of ideas. Not to mention that, things that aren't talked about here. We're now getting countries and cities, and so we're coming out of that. I'm not going to travel and leave my little feudal state. And we're trading with people, and we're going, and different people are coming into different places. So we're just in contact with more people. If through no other way, if for no other reason but through conversation, your ideas are going to be shared. All right. The first big change, oh, look, it's a vocab word, is the shift to the heliocentric model, sun-centered model. Who is responsible for this? Whose idea was this? That the sun is the center of the universe, not Earth. Anybody? Anybody out there? Hello? This thing on? Hello? Come on, people. Work with me here. What are you going to do the 8th of April when you can't hide from me? Yeah, whose idea is it? Copernicus?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got Copernicus. Is he right? He's a tennis player. I don't know. All right. What it is that the Earth is not the center of the universe. It's just another planet. The Earth revolves around the sun, and it spins on an axis while it revolves around the sun. The axis is kind of important. And it's not straight, it's tilted. Which is why summers are longer. Anyway. All right. Let's see if he's right. Night and day were caused by Earth's rotation. I don't know what they thought caused it. Oh, yes, I do. The sun moved, and the moon came up. If the Earth is fixed, then the reason we have night and day is because the sun moves. Well, no, Earth does, and it rotates. Okay. Oh, and by the way, this picture right here of all these planets, that not yet. All right, the heliocentric theory. So here we go. This is geocentric versus heliocentric models. All right. And you can watch the video if you're really interested. The notes are posted. He was right. Nicolaus Copernicus. It was his idea. Sun-centered universe. Earth is no different than any other planet. And then he wrote on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. What a nice title. All right. Put that out of the way. So Nicolaus Copernicus. There's 60 years. Not bad. No, is it 60? 70 years. All right. Again, post-plague, during the Renaissance, Northern Renaissance. Moving along. Come on. Play nice. What did I do? Our next guy is Johannes Kepler. Kepler is responsible, again, using experiments and observations, science. He looked at planetary movement as a mathematical formula. Planets move around the sun in elliptical orbits, not circles. And you can figure this out using math. So there you go. July 2nd. All right. It's my birthday. And he confirms, substantiates, supports Copernicus's ideas. So see, now we're seeing, what's up, Tristan? So now we're seeing two people using science to kind of provide evidence to support one another. Again, science. Galileo Galilei. Magnifico. Okay. He designs the first telescope with a lens and sees that stars and the moon move. And their movements are similar to the planets. Can't you just smell a problem here? All of this stuff that is messing with all the history and all the preconceived notions of how the universe works, not going to sit well with some big important group of people. The church believes that the heavens are fixed. The church believes that they are unmoving and that Earth is central. They are furious with Galileo. Galileo is a good Catholic. And here is one of their own saying, no, not how it works. He gets in trouble for it. He's accused of heresy. Heresy are crimes against the church. He's brought to trial before the Spanish Inquisition, and because his life is on the line, he's like, okay, just kidding. It's my bad. Sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Too much wine. I don't know. I take it all back. By the way, that was all paraphrasing. I don't know what he said. But he recants. He takes it back. Because, staying alive, you can believe what you believe and keep it to yourself and still stay alive. Write a book and leave it for when you die. What are they going to do with you then? He gathered observational data that supported the heliocentric model. Again, research, data, science. He wrote the dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. Okay, that's great. That's his important book. He took it all back. But he still did research and he still believed. But publicly, he took it back just to kind of make his life easier. Why did the Catholic Church care? Well, Galileo was Catholic. The Protestant Reformation is going on, and they're trying not to lose people to the Protestant Church because I don't know, but I bet you a quick Google search might tell you that Copernicus and Kepler were probably Lutheran. Probably Protestant. I don't know. But I can see their fear. What he's describing is going to make a lot of people who are devout and deeply into their Catholicism kind of nervous and questioning, well, wait a minute, we were told that God did this and this is the world, and now you're telling us just by looking through this tube and some glass that no. So it's a change. It's a new way of looking at things, and that frightens people, whether it's 1587 or 2021. Change tends to freak people out. Movements in the heavens which contradicted church doctrine. Anybody know? Oh, never mind. It's Isaac Newton. Anybody know what he did? Why is he famous? Laws of motion. I think he also invented calculus. Again, universal law of motion. Every object in the universe attracts every other object. Is he the whole object of motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, all that kind of stuff? Okay. Newton. Apple hit him in the head. Mathematical principles of natural philosophy. He explained gravity. Basically, what goes up must come down. That's kind of cool. Sir Isaac Newton. Notice we're now in the 17th century. It's 1642. This is definitely Enlightenment. Definitely post-Renaissance. We are 1727. We're like, well, we're 62 years from, no, 62 years from France storming Bastilles, and revolutions are about to occur. So we are full-on Enlightenment mode now. The universe is a giant clock. All parts work together, but God set the clock in motion. This idea of God being a clockmaker really comes to fore during the Enlightenment. And there are a group of people who believe in God, but totally believe in this way of thinking that God built it and just wound it up and let it go. And now it's up to us. And they're called deists. And a lot of Enlightenment philosophers were deists. They acknowledged God, but not the in control of everybody's life God. In fact, some of our founding fathers, Ben Franklin was a deist. I think Jefferson was a deist. So there were a lot of people who built this country or set it in motion who believed in God, but not in the way Catholics believe in God, or Protestants believe in God, or Muslims believe in God. They just see it as this thing that creates and then lets us go. It's up to us to make it work. We don't need that. That's great. You can watch that on your own. All right, Vesalius. Now we're going to move from planetary bodies to bodies, human bodies. Vesalius was the first person to dissect a human, even though people thought you shouldn't, because I think to desecrate a body in that way kept them from heaven. I do know that if you were beheaded, that you couldn't go to heaven. So the body had to be intact, I believe. He wrote On the Fabric of the Human Body. And again, this is during the same time. This is after or around Leonardo. And again, trying to figure out best way to describe it. So I was a neuroscience major my first 2 years of college, studying the brain, central nervous system, and all that kind of stuff. And whether you were going to be every single person in the science program where I went to school, even if you were going to major in psychology or it didn't matter, you had to take bio. And the reason for that was where I went to school thought it was very important that you understood how the body worked normally. That way you could tell if it wasn't working right. So that made sense. It was the only class I took that had more than 20, 30 people in it my entire time in college. Go to a small school. But if you're trying to figure out why people are dying, why the plague killed people, knowing how the body works might be beneficial. And again, examining and practicing on bodies that are dead is how you're going to learn how things go and what things look like. He published observations including drawings of human organs, of bones, and of muscles so we can understand what they look like and try and figure out how they work to try and develop actual medicine so that your barber is not your doctor anymore. William Harvey. He looks pretty British. Published On the Motion of the Heart and Blood in Animals. Nice. He showed that the heart actually acted like a pump and that blood circulated through the body. Again, each one, a little more information, a little more information. Francis Bacon. No, he's not. Oh, nice hat. All right. He was an English politician and a writer who had an interest in science. So his scientific stuff is kind of the back end around, and you might know why he's essential and important to the life of a science of the sciences. Pretty important. That's right. I'm reading your minds. I can tell. Yes. He criticized ancient philosophies and how they arrived at conclusions. So how are you answering your questions? He urged scientists to experiment. Test your hypotheses. And when you get to college, you'll realize that what you are actually proving is the opposite of what you're trying to prove. It's called the null hypothesis. It took me like a semester to figure that out. He developed the scientific method. Francis Bacon. The cool thing about this, and when I was in college in the late 90s, medical schools were looking for people who might have been poli-science majors or English majors or history majors to go into medicine. because that would have brought a different lens into looking at how to solve a problem, because a history head is different than a science head. A writer sees things differently. And it's all about how you approach questions and how you approach problems. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, law schools, med schools, specialty schools were looking for kids from not the traditional path to get there, because they're going to offer a different way of looking at things. That's what the scientific method is asking you to do. Don't just say, because that's the way it is. Why is it that way? Experiment, ask questions. What are you trying to prove? Now go see if you can prove it. Francis Bacon. Bacon. What are you doing? Okay, and then there it is. Ask the question, do research, construct a hypothesis, test your hypothesis, analyze your data, draw a conclusion, report your results. Can you replicate it? Then it's good science. All right, don't worry about that. Observation, research, hypothesis, experiment, analysis, conclusion. There you go. What do you see? What is your question? What are you going to answer? Conduct your experiment. Look at the results of your experiment. Did it work or not? Easy peasy. All right. Rene Descartes. Uh-oh, I see math. Come on. There he is. Nice. Looks like a musketeer. Okay. French scientist and mathematician, developed analytical geometry. He links algebra and geometry. Yay, you. And he develops new tools for scientific research. Basically, we're going to get the stats here shortly. You're going to be able to see trends and graph things and try and figure out progressions and all that kind of fun stuff. Statistics was the only math I ever liked. So there is Rene Descartes. Rene the map. All right, so those are our scientists. They're the people who begin to question. And this piggybacks, carries into these people. Now we're going to solve all kinds of problems. Not only that, but the Enlightenment also looks for all kinds of solutions. Not just science and how the world works and how, the body works. But the Enlightenment in the beginning is still religious at its core. It's still an understanding that if we are indeed created by a God, then there's nothing we can't do if we put our mind to it. And that's what this time period begins as. It goes off the rails and goes crazy revolutions and guillotines and stuff. But in the beginning, at least in France, it was, how can we make the world better using the gifts we have? And that gift being our brain, that is apparently the same brain as God's in a way. Like if God makes us, because that's the thought, then we should be able to, if we put our mind to it, solve every problem. Not just medical problems and scientific problems, but political problems, social problems, education, poverty. All kinds of problems can be dealt with if we just stop and think. We could use a little enlightenment right now. So what was it? It emerges out of the scientific revolution, and it ends, at least from the European perspective, in the French Revolution. And the reason it ends after the French Revolution is because it is actually stopped. The powers to be, the powers that be, and we don't talk about it a lot at all in this class. We talked about it a lot in my AP class. Are so afraid of this that they just stop and they return everybody back to monarchs. Like we get all conservative in the 1800s in Europe and other places. So it is so revolutionary, no pun intended, that it just gets literally, legally, politically, stop. All right. Stuff is fascinating. All right. The spokesman for the Enlightenment is a rising middle class. Remember, we're trading now. We're exploring. There's colonies goods are coming back. We've got a whole merchant class of people. The middle class is starting to grow. And if you're not in the fields, well, you can learn how to read, you can learn how to write. We've got the printing press. So this group of people is starting to grow. Now, again, it's still, trust me, peasants are still peasants, and they're still the bulk of society. But this middle class, a lot of them are going to have more money and be more important to their city than the church or the wealthy aristocracy. But they have no say, and we'll get to that. That's where the revolutions come from. Paris is the center of the Enlightenment, which also makes perfect sense when you consider this the first major place to explode. Well, the British colonies are, but as far as in Europe, it's Paris. All right. And they're searching for new ways, new laws, new ways to govern humans. All sorts of things come out of the Enlightenment. Because remember, once we start reading, and once Bibles are now printed in French and English and German, when you, again, I said this, if we all read the same book, we're not all going to see it the same way. That starts happening with the Bible. What it means is not going to be universally accepted. It's going to be personalized. It's going to be a personal interpretation. And those interpretations are going to grow into this movement of, well, you know, if I can see God this way, and Ryan can see God this way, and Holden can see this part of the Bible this way, and yet we all still believe, and we can change how we see the Bible, then surely we can change how we're governed. So that's just a man. So that's where we're kind of going here. All right. A distrust of tradition and religion is a product of the Enlightenment. We have been with kings and with the church for centuries, and look at all the stuff that's happened. And more to the point, it's not answering any questions. Scientific method could also be applied to society, as I just said. And this is a huge shift. During the Enlightenment, there is this idea that man is naturally good. Whereas I believe in the Catholic faith, and if I'm wrong, please correct me because I'm not a practicing Catholic. And I know in the Baptist faith that man is sinful by nature. Man is not naturally good by nature. So that's huge, that we actually see us as decent from the start. And that goes back, we're not there yet. Okay. Another thing they don't like is the old regime, the old stuff. It's built on tradition. It's a world of hierarchy and privilege and inequality. You are who you are by birth, not by merit. It's not a meritocracy. You do not earn your position based on how well you work. You're born into it. It is allied with the church, or allied with the church. And it gets challenged by these Enlightenment people. So it's the old regime versus the new. It's the grown-ups versus the kids. It's the 1960s. It's 1848. It's 1968. It's last summer. A conflict with the capitalist middle class. This is what I was talking about. Capitalism is growing. People are making money. They're investing. Not only are countries making money through the whole mercantilism thing, but now individuals are making money. And they want more of a say in what happens with their money. They want more of a say in how their country or their city is going to run. And the powers that be, those making the decisions, don't want to share. And they don't want to let these people, this growing group of people, into the decision-making process. It's wealth. Tension and discord, like I did, everything I just said is on this slide. They're trying to break through that glass ceiling, and it's just not how they're knocking, and they're barricading. They're not only not answering the door, the old regime is barricading the door. So here come the people. These are 18th century, which means 1700, French intellectuals, which means they're probably middle class. They have time. They're literate. Philosophe is French for philosopher. Truth through reason. Not because that's the way it is, but because we're going to think it through. Natural laws. Natural is good and reasonable. Natural laws are laws that happen or laws that occurred because they do. Gravity is a natural law. Happiness. This belief in natural laws leads to happiness. The belief that there are things that exist that no one gave us. These laws happen. They're not man-made laws. They're natural. They happen. Acknowledging these laws leads to a happy life. And they believe in progress. They believe society can be perfected. Now, perfection is relative. And, let's not forget for a minute that this is still a minority of a population thinking this. But they are going to look beyond themselves. And they are going to look at how we can make society better. And people should be free. Happy, progress, and freedom. Not bad. So now the trick is, how do we achieve this in a society with absolute rulers? Because that's where we are. Here we go. One of the issues was censorship. The old regime was trying to take control of new thinking. Publishers and writers were hounded by censors. In fact, when the revolution ends and that whole thing comes back that I was talking about, they go back to doing this. Over 1,000 booksellers and authors were imprisoned in the Bastille. The Bastille is the French armory / prison in Paris in the early 1700s. So if you spoke out or offered anything that kind of ran counter against the powers that be, you went to jail for speaking your mind. And these are the things that the philosophes are going to say, these are natural rights. Everybody should have this right. It's a God-given right. Okay, we'll get to this in just a second. The thinkers. The first one, Thomas Hobbes. And this is the part you need for tomorrow. Hobbes wrote a book called Leviathan. He was convinced. Now, Hobbes was convinced, so I'm guessing he's probably a Calvinist or a Presbyterian, maybe a Puritan, that all human beings are wicked and evil, that humans exist in a primitive state, and that the reason that we... Okay, so in a nutshell, Hobbes believes that people are basically bad, and that we have to have a strong government to keep people from hurting themselves. That's what Hobbes believes. People are bad. We allow a government to rule our lives to protect us from ourselves. That's Thomas Hobbes. Man is brutish and blah, 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 blah. He also believed in absolute monarchs. So he is a thinker during the Enlightenment who understands how the mind works, and he comes to the conclusion that we're not really nice people and we need somebody to keep us in line. We need an absolute monarch to keep us in line. So that's Thomas Hobbes. Man is not good. We need someone who's going to keep us from hurting ourselves or others. Thomas Hobbes. And notice that he lived 91 years, so his life wasn't too bad. The next person, John Locke. John Locke is 180 degrees from Thomas Hobbes. He believed that people learn from experience. He favored self-government and let the people rule he believed in the idea of tabula rasa. Anybody know what that is? That when you were born with a clean slate. You don't hate. You don't. We learn based upon what we experience that no one is born with racism. Let's just say that it's learned. He believes in natural rights, the rights to life, to liberty, and to property that we and the American Declaration turned into happiness because it just sounds better than property when we had slaves. And that these are natural rights. These are rights that are given to you when you're born. They're not given to you by the government. They're above the government. And the government's job is not to give these rights, but to protect these rights and to make sure that they remain in your life. And if the government doesn't do that, John Locke believed we had the right to overthrow the government. So if we elect people who aren't protecting these rights, it is our responsibility to get rid of them. And this is an important thing. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution in America are called the Bill of Rights. None of those rights are given to us by our government because the American founding fathers were enlightened people and they read Locke and they read Hobbes and they read Montesquieu and they read all these different people. Those 10 amendments are there to tell the government that you can't touch these. That's what the government does not give you the right to bear an arm. The government does not give you the right to free speech. What those documents tell you is the government cannot touch those. And we'll get into those things later. And he wrote 2 treatises on government. Okay. And he inspired the American Revolution. He's one of them. So the Enlightenment's going to happen in France. And then those thinkers are going to make their way to the English colonies, and they're going to have a revolution for independence. And then that whole idea of revolution is going to come back to France and then to Europe. Our next person, Francois Arouet, just Voltaire. Voltaire with the hair. That's how I remember Voltaire. All right. Voltaire admired the English government. He mocked the laws of France and religion. There should be separation of church and state. And what this means is, and this is important, and we're supposed to have, and we have this today in America. The church, spiritual laws, your body, your soul. That's what church is responsible for. State, that's the government. That's the laws on earth. They should be separate. You should not have the church writing your laws on earth. You should not have the government telling you what to worship. That is separation of church and state. They're 2 entities that may or may not have influence on your life. The state will. But they're separate, and they should stay separate. They shouldn't do this. There should be no crossing of the streams. And again, crush the evil thing. Okay. Anyway. The next person. Let me go back. Voltaire and yes. Montesquieu, Baron de Montesquieu, Spirit of Laws. He believed in the whole idea of separation of powers and checks and balances. So Montesquieu is the reason we have 3 branches of government. Montesquieu is the reason that each branch of government is responsible for keeping the other branch in check. So Montesquieu is the reason that we have limited government and no one branch is supposed to have too much power. It comes from him. Separation of powers, keeping people in check, that's Montesquieu. And again, that's why we have a legislative, executive, and judicial branch in the American government. And the legislative branch was the first branch created in our Constitution. So I guess you can make the argument that it's the most important of the 3 branches because it makes the laws for the country. Our next person, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau believed in individual freedom, that man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. Rousseau believed in direct democracy, which means everybody votes. and you count all the votes, and that's how a decision is made. America is not a direct democracy. It's a representative democracy. And he wrote the social contract. And basically, his contribution to our way of life is this last part. That we are all born with rights naturally occurring. That these rights exist, that no one could take them away from us. But we understand that we need a government. So we enter a contract. We are willing to give up some of our freedom to have a government to protect us and protect our rights. That's what the social contract is. It's a contract between us and our government. And it states that we will allow you to govern us, and we'll give up some of our freedoms. But if you start to impinge upon our rights, we will remove you. So it's just an agreement that allows countries to have governments, in a way. No oversimplification, that's fine. Now, salon, or in French, salon, which I believe is French for living room. In the salon, well, think about this. In every movie, whether it's a barbershop or a beauty salon, what goes on in those shops? Besides haircuts. What goes on in a barbershop or a salon when you go? Or you get your mani? Talk about what? Life. What's going on in the world, man? That's where salon comes from. This is how women played a part in the Enlightenment. Wealthy women who had time on their hands in Paris, would host gatherings. It'd be scientists, politicians, philosophers, writers, artists, and they'd all come together and talk. This is the first internet cafe. This is the website. This is your search engine, right? This is your Google of the 18th century. And they all drank coffee. Tristan, I'll go as live as long as I want to go live. You're free to go. This stuff has to be covered. Philosophers, writers, artists, scientists gather to share ideas, like I just said. And then one of the most famous salon hostesses was Madame Geoffrion. So she had time. She's not that important. Just understand that that's what they did. She matters because she's a woman and she's involved, and very few women are involved historically. So in that sense, it matters. But this is one of the few places where women could take part in this process. All right, Diderot made an encyclopedia, 28 volumes. Basically, he collected stuff about it. He literally makes the first encyclopedia. They were outraged. The Pope threatened to excommunicate him, and the Pope threatened to excommunicate any Catholic who read it, because basically he took all the stuff he could get his hands on about economics and slavery and human rights and religion, and put it in a book, or in lots of books, so people could read it. And again, if you're giving people information that runs counter to what we've known for 1,700 years, that's a threat. Translations help spread the Enlightenment ideas across Europe. Yay, printing press. Art and literature. Enlightenment art is reflected in the arts. Baroque style is grand and ornate. Neoclassical is simple and elegant. The music of the time was Haydn and Mozart. Beethoven is pushing more towards romantic. Beethoven sounds so much different than Mozart because Beethoven gets the grand piano, the pianoforte, and full orchestration. Then he incorporates a chorus into the greatest song ever written, which is the Ninth Symphony. So the music is big and grand and fancy. Everything is bright and big and celebrating life. We get novels now. People are writing because we can get books into the hands of people. All right, enlightened despots. These are just people who use the Enlightenment to their own advantage. The impact of the Enlightenment will start here. Okay, so Ideas led to people challenging long-held ideas. And these ideas lead to these two revolutions, which are ultimately going to lead to lots of revolutions in Europe, in Haiti. All of South America is going to be independent by 1830 for various reasons. But the Enlightenment, even though it's limited in who to, and also it's a pretty European thing, the one that we're talking about. It doesn't mean that this didn't go on in Asia. It doesn't mean it didn't go on in other places. But this one we're talking about is a very European thing. Thanks. You're free to go. Make sure you use these notes for tomorrow on your assignment, especially the thinkers, the Enlightenment thinkers. And if you have any questions, I'll be asynchronous, and I'll have the site open and your test open at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll see you tomorrow.